Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, everyone.
Hey, people.
Hello!
Welcome to Wednesday.
Oh, it's Wednesday indeed.
Yeah.
I don't know what character that is, but
I'm
enjoying
not
it.
sure either.
Welcome to the morning show, everybody. I'm Reed Garcia.
This is Ryder Richards.
And he's back with us, ladies and gentlemen.
Hooray!
I just want to say, I know we had a lot of our viewers write in who are worried. Ryder, so old. Last week we were talking about wills and things like that. Did something happen? Don't worry, he's still here.
I just broke my hip, folks. It's fine.
And his vocal cords, evidently.
Yeah.
So, something's going on over there.
I have to. Sorry. I don't know. Maybe that's just my happy, energetic voice.
Yes.
I sound like a 78-year-old drunk guy.
I'm glad that he's 78. And one other important thing to point out is that this time Ryder put the earbud in his correct ear, so it actually looks like it should. So you're on firing on all cylinders today.
You have no idea. I woke up like a full 10 minutes earlier.
Wow.
I know. It's amazing what 10 minutes can do.
Yeah,
Just
it really is.
wake up earlier, brain starts firing. This is second cup of coffee today.
Wow.
I had a primer cup before getting here.
Nice, good primer.
Yeah,
I like
thanks.
it. I like it.
But I did hear something weird about coffee. I hear that it doesn't actually wake you up. It just blocks all the chemicals that make you think you're asleep. Anyway, we
Interesting.
can talk about that later.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
digress immediately.
I like that. Well, welcome back to the show, Ryder. We're glad you bring your digressions and your tangents and your rabbit holes and
I have so
your
many of them.
biases. And, we could just go on and on
I'm
and
not
on.
biased at all.
I know. Me
About
neither.
myself.
Me neither. Well, yesterday we had a lovely guest host by the name of Danielle Garcia. And some of you may have wondered, because I'm not sure I ever explicitly said it, but Danielle is my wife.
Oh, what?
Yeah.
Oops.
Yeah.
Oh,
Ooh.
I've been
I think she
on
knows,
Slack
hopefully.
hanging out with her a little too. No,
Yeah.
not really.
Okay.
No, we by the way, we have a work chat on Slack, a thing that we can talk on, and it's always kind of fun because he'll still refer to her as Danielle on all those things, and I'm just waiting for him to actually refer to her as, his wife.
Lady.
The lady.
Woman.
Anyway, sorry, I digress again.
Oh, no.
Where were we going?
Oh, that is a great name. Where were we going?
Where were we going?
No,
Name
so
for
we
the
were talking about
podcast.
yesterday. So we had Danielle on as Ryder was supposedly taking a little rest, but more so probably giving him the time to do some of the other things he's been busy with.
Yeah, so finished up some stuff on the office space. So we're moving offices. I built out the space in the workshop or the studio, whatever you want to call it. And yeah, ended up getting some taping and bedding done, some mud work. Ended up getting a coat of paint applied late last night. But it's been raining here, so it's been super humid. So it's been taking a long time for the plaster to dry. So then you can't put on the paint until the plaster dries.
Well, there's nothing
yada,
more
yada.
fun than watching plaster dry.
Yeah. I actually got in some nice meditative time just staring and watching paint dry.
Nice.
Yeah, it was
like
great.
It. Well, we're going to talk a little bit more about what we talked about yesterday, because we actually are going to have Danielle come back on later today to recap on a couple of things and clarify a couple of things. But excitingly, we now have our first repeat guest.
What?
If you don't count Danielle, I mean, she doesn't really count because she's my wife, so I don't really know if that counts.
See, this is why it gets so confusing.
Yeah, I don't know. But anyways, today we have Alexandra Mannerings with us. And she was with us, I believe, 1 week ago exactly
Wednesday,
today.
yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, so from one hump day to the other. And last time she was here, we got to meet her for the first time, and she talked a little bit about her background and her company Mirakinos, where she helps community businesses and nonprofits by helping educate them and work with them on their data analytics.
Yes. Yeah, super fascinating. Actually, I had a conversation with my mother this weekend, and she goes, that guest y'all had on was amazing. And I was like, yeah.
That's high praise right there.
Well done, Reed. Yeah,
Yes.
my mom was super stoked.
Well, I think that is awesome. And for those of you who back then or now are like, why the heck do I care about data analytics? Well, that's because in your life, whether you want to or not, data is all around you. You're generating data, and you have to interpret data. And so that's why I thought it was very important for us to bring on Alexandra, because she knows a lot about that stuff and how it impacts the average Joe.
Yes. Yeah. And of course, what's really fun too is a lot of the big picture topics about how we're using it, how companies are using it, how it could be used, how it should be used, some of the errors we can bump into with it. It's increasingly controlling a lot of aspects of our lives without us knowing it. And so Reed and I went off on that a little bit last time too. So yeah, as an authority on it, it's got to be better talking to her about this stuff than just listening to us blather about
Oh,
it.
amen. And I also want to point out that even though her expertise is in data analytics, she's already brought additional value to the table when she was talking to us about living wills, and a couple of other things as well. So we're really excited to have her on again today. So without further ado, let's bring her on. Good morning.
Hello.
Hello. All right, is my mic working? Because it was giving me all
Yes.
sorts of hilarious things and backstage.
Oh, it's working fine for us.
Yeah.
You're looking very radiant, nice and red.
I like the
it.
asymmetrical shirt style. That's cool.
Thanks.
How are you doing this morning, Alexandra?
I haven't quite figured out the lighting.
Yeah, it's okay. You're a
I'm
little
doing
bright,
great,
but
thank
you can just be like, "Hey,
Eva's
it's
watching
lit."
Paw Patrol.
Oh,
I know. Where we go. I'll like slide back from my leg or something. But
Well, cool. So how have you been the last week?
yeah. Well, my 4-year-old came down with a stomach bug on Monday, so it was
Oh man,
vomit every 30 minutes. That was an exciting
that's
thing to
exciting.
deal
That's
with.
exciting.
There's not much else you can do with a day. There isn't much else you can do with a day when that's what you've got.
Yeah, sometimes your body just says, "Yep, this is what you're doing today."
I just got this vision of just like strapping the kid to the toilet. I'm sorry, I've got some work to do. If you could just keep vomiting straight into here, that'd be great.
That's
just
pretty good.
hit the flush handle every now and then.
Well, I don't know if you happened to hear, but did you catch that high praise from Ryder's mom?
I did.
Oh,
That's
man.
very flattering. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's good. I'm so glad to hear that. Well, today, we'll see where the world takes us. But one of the things that we wanted to talk about was proportions of risk, and that's one of the things that is an interesting thing because it's like, I've got a 5% chance this thing's going to happen. Or depending on what you see and who's telling you the message and what they're trying to get across, they might say, oh, you're 10 times more likely if you take this drug to have this effect happen. But maybe they don't tell you that. That just means you went from 0.0000005% to 0.00. Oh, I can't count that many zeros, but
Yeah.
it's still a really, really small number.
Right.
Yeah. So Alexandra, what do you have to say on this topic?
Yeah, there's sort of two halves to this. The first is that just generally, how do you interpret if somebody says you have a 10% chance of this thing happening? What does that mean to you? And one of the things that I've noticed, I think it's just a human trait, like I do it, everyone does it, is that if you have a 10% chance that something happens and like it doesn't happen, people are like, oh, well, see, it wasn't going to happen anyway. Rather than you just ended up in the 90% of the likelihood of something that's happening. And this is more common with things that you don't have happen over and over and over again, right? When we say there's a 40% chance of rain, if you look at weather forecasters, when they say there's a 40% chance of rain, 40% of the time it rains on a day that they say there's 40% chance of rain. And yet we'll still be like, oh, they said it was going to rain today and it didn't.
Yeah, if I had $1 every time I heard, oh, if I could be a meteorologist, I'd be wrong all the time.
I know.
What was the other weird? I was listening to this book that was talking about this the other day with weather forecasters because yes, they have so much historical data to use and all this stuff, and so they're really, really accurate about casting this stuff. 40% of the time, but people sort of tend to mistake it. And there's this idea that people want surety, and so they'll say.
Right.
That they're like, I either want a 100% chance or a 0% chance. And you know what? If you're a weather forecaster, you can still, on average, come out with the same sort of
correct,
a kind of a correct thing. giving 100% or 0% chances. This is yes/no equations, and people
Yeah.
really prefer a yes/no
That's funky.
to an actual
But
percentage because we
Yes.
just don't seem to handle them correctly.
No. And I read in a book this amazing quote that says there's a difference between being uncertain about the future and the future being uncertain.
Oh, good one. Yeah.
And the forecasters are actually very certain that there's a 40% chance. Like they're very right about that, and their confidence interval on that is actually very small, meaning that the likelihood is very close to 40%. The problem is that the future itself is not in fact certain. So it's not like they're trying to predict something that's guaranteed to happen or not happen, and they just have to like guess what that is. The future itself doesn't necessarily know whether it's going to rain or not. And it's the same like when we're talking about proportion of risk, like your risk of developing cancer. If you have a 10% chance of developing cancer, it doesn't mean that you're trying to like figure out this preset future, and there's like 9 futures in which you have cancer in one future, or you don't have cancer in one future which you do, and you have to like figure out the one that's like yours. Is that we don't know. The future hasn't happened yet. And that uncertainty is really, really hard for us to sit with. It's unsettling. It's confusing. And I was just talking to somebody about that was one of the things that I think we got really wrong with how we communicated about COVID.
Yeah,
No one wanted
for
to
sure.
communicate uncertainty. No one wanted to say, this is our best guess, but we don't know for sure. And what that led them to is to communicate uncertainties, right? This is the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And then a week later, they'd be like, wait, that was not the right thing to do. This now is definitely the right thing to do.
Yeah, and you lose trust and you lose faith when you start doing those things. I mean, you turn into the boy who cried wolf at some point, and then no one believes you because you keep trying to be certain and coming across as not knowing what you're talking about, which is really funny because I felt like that's all Trump did was sort of voice these kind of outrageous claims, but he was very certain about them.
Right.
And you saw that very much swayed a large percentage of the populace.
Well, it's because people are they respect that confidence, right? And they're like, oh, this is someone I can follow.
Would you call him a confidence man?
I see what you did there. But yeah, it's an interesting thing. And one of the first, I have to share this quote because it's when talking statistics. Nary a scholarly discussion do I not hear this quote said. From the movie Anchorman, there's a cologne involved in there, and it's called Sex Panther. And the guy famously says, 60% of the time, it works. Every time. So that's how that stat works. But yeah, one of the things that I've heard touted very often, similar to COVID, but maybe less controversial, the flu vaccine. Oh, I've never got the flu vaccine in my whole life, and I've never got the flu, so why the heck would I get it anyways? What do you think about that one, Alexandra?
Well, you brought up a great other part about proportion of risk and like how we perceive it. We live one life and we have one lived experience. A proportion of risk is coming from a study, over a whole bunch of different people. And so like it's sometimes hard for us to jive the fact that like I know what happened to me, and I'm going to try to, and so there it has to be binary. Either something happens to you or it doesn't. It is a 0 or 100%. There's like no in between. You can't like kind of get cancer or like kind of crash your bike. It's either does or it doesn't. So when you're looking at something where it says, 10% chance, you're like, well, I didn't. And then you're like, it's a 0% chance. So I think that clash between the generality of statistics where you're talking about many, many, many lives or many, many, many occurrences and the binary part of like our own existence is really hard, right? To get that mental alignment in. And I say this all the time because it's so true. We as humans are programmed for language, right? You expose a baby to language and the baby will learn language. That's all you have to do. They just have to be around people talking. But we are not wired for advanced statistics. It never comes naturally. It never will come naturally. It doesn't matter how often you study it and how much you work with it. It's still something that you have to consciously stop. Be like, hang on, what does this actually mean? And how do I translate this sort of out there thing into something of how I'm going to understand it? And so, right, like with your idea of like, well, I've never gotten the flu and therefore I won't get the flu in the future. Like it's true. Your lived experience is 100%. You never get the flu. But that doesn't change your risk of getting it in the future. And that's another thing that we have difficulty with is recurring risks. Right.
How do you,
the whole hot shot fallacy, right? if a basketball player is making
Right.
every basket, we somehow think that that's going to change the likelihood that he'll make his next basket. And there's like a little bit of psychology involved. Like maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. But really, when you're looking at independent events, right? Like, will I get the flu or will I not? Will I crash my car today, or will I crash it tomorrow, or whatever it is, where there's these discrete events, whether or not it's happened before doesn't change the likelihood of it happening the next time.
Yeah, it's a great point.
So
Ryder, you wanted to chime in?
Oh yeah, no, I was just going to ask like how you pause. I mean, how do you know when you're bumping into one of these fallacies? Are there is there something that you should be looking for when you move throughout your daily life that
Yeah.
will sort of clue you into, oh, this is something I need to pause and actually do the math on? Or, I mean, I don't know. It sounds like something that if we don't think about it intuitively, then we're just
yeah.
making sort of really quick, fast thinking decisions.
Yeah. That's such a great question. And the answer depends a little bit on the thing that you're thinking about. One of the things that I use as a red flag is anything that makes me feel really comfortable and like reassures me that I'm right. That's actually a red flag for me. Because
Uh-oh.
we have something
I get a
called
lot of red flags all
Yeah.
the time.
and it's funny, I still fall for them. And like I'll finish a conversation and 10 minutes later be like, oh, I did it again. Like, but the reason that is a flag for me is we have something called confirmation bias, right? We seek things that reaffirm what we already believe. And so if something comes up that I hadn't heard before, and I'm like, see, I told you, I knew it. That's when I go, hang on. I got to give this a little extra critical thought because my automatic processes are going to approve this. It agrees with what I already think. So I'm going to miss all of the things that are wrong with it. And I'm going to overweight the things that are right with it and run with it. Like one of my favorites was about 4 years ago, this thing went around the internet about how broccoli has more protein than steak.
Ah, yes.
Right?
I remember
And
that.
I missed that one.
And it went around because it was all of these vegetarians who like wanted something to hold on to about the fact, right? And I mean, I say this as I was a vegetarian for 15 years, right? And so you're talking about how healthy being a vegetarian is, how possible it is to be a vegetarian. So this thing pops up and you go, see, I knew it. And you don't stop to actually think, well, hang on, biochemically, what's in broccoli that's giving it protein? And I remember talking to someone who
I
was
just want to point
very
out real
smart.
quick that the average person, I don't think they ever said that sentence.
Biochemically.
Biochemically.
Yeah.
It's chewy. That's enough.
Yeah.
Well, but don't you think if I asked you where does protein come from? I think most people would say, well, like muscle is protein. We eat protein to build muscle, and muscle is protein. Like, does broccoli have muscles? No.
It tastes pretty strong sometimes.
It can smell pretty strong.
It smells
sometimes.
pretty, yeah.
But you were saying
Well-
about your friend
Asparagus is
Alexandra.
super
Sorry.
No, no,
to
no.
interrupt.
No, it's fine, but it's true. No one's going biochemically what's in that. I agree with that. But I had a friend who's a PhD scientist, like very, very bright person. I looked up to her hugely. And she came to me and was like, guess what? Broccoli has more protein than steak. And I just looked at her for like half a second. And I said, really? And she looked at me, she goes, oh no, it doesn't. Like, because she hadn't had that like pause, right? It confirmed what she was thinking and off she went. And we'll do this all the time. If you read a political article that agrees with your political position and someone asks you to say like what's right and wrong with this article, you will list all the things that are right with it and you won't even register the things that are wrong with it. And if someone gives you the identical article and changes the names, you'll all of a sudden find everything that's wrong with it and you'll miss everything that's right with it. And the thing is like, this is just how your brain works. You can't help it. Your first pass, that's what your brain will do. My alma mater at Emory did a great study where they did exactly this thing. They wrote a fake article and they asked people, are you Democrat? Are you Republican? Are you independent? And if you were Democrat, right, they replaced all of the names with Republican names and then like gave it to you. And basically when you read it, the only parts of your brain that lit up were the emotional parts of your brain. Never hit your logic centers. And then they'd give it to Republicans and switch it and it would do the same.
Yeah.
And it was only independents who didn't necessarily have like a belief strongly about the people in the article that it would go through the logic part of your brain first. So that's why I said that if something really agrees with me, that's one of my red flags.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's such a, I mean, it feels like, yeah, something that we should be kind of clued into by now. There's so much on behavioral economics about this kind of confirmation bias and hindsight bias and tribalism, where we just align ourselves with our team and quit thinking. It is also fascinating to think that if reading, and I've heard before that a lot of times to make a memory, it has to go through an emotional process.
Mhm.
So in order to lock something into your brain, you have to emotionally process it first. So
Yes.
that does make a kind of a sense then that it would light up the emotional centers of your brain. And then that means that you're going to make judgments about it.
Hmm. And I am not saying that it's bad for it to get your emotions involved. In fact, it has to get your emotions involved for it to matter at all. So Phineas Gage is like this famous example of what happens when you don't have emotions. So in 18 something, I never remember the year, he was a railroad worker, and he was drilling in holes and dropping gunpowder, right, and TNT to blast places for the railroad to go. And someone called his name at the wrong time, and he launched this iron bar through his head, like straight through his skull. And it took out the emotional part of his brain. And he miraculously survives this, but he's a completely different person afterward. And he's incapable of making what we would call a logical decision. And everyone was like, wait, and at the time they didn't know why, but he's been this famous case study, and they found all of these other examples of people who've lost them through strokes and accidents. And they find out that if you don't have emotions, you can't actually make decisions, right? Nothing matters. If you have no
Yeah.
values, they call it the decision making landscape's really flat.
Mm. And
Because
Go ahead.
the Russian journalist who had a perfect memory, but couldn't figure out what to care about, right? Because when you remember all information, then it's all equal.
yeah.
Yeah, and another parallel I was gonna say is depression. That can be one of the symptoms of depression. Is just like I don't care about anything, and there's no way out. All those types of things, and so therefore you can't make the choices, even if you know logically the things that you need to be doing, or even logically the fact that I am in this depression and it's not forever and things like that. But real quick, I want to bring us back to some of the statistics, because I know if we sat here, we could go all day on about psychology.
Oh
and
yeah,
various
this
things
is so
like
much
that.
fun talking to you about this.
Yes,
stuff. It's
and
great.
but we got to keep our time with Alexandra kind of like cocaine, just a little bit of hit here, and then it just takes like 20 minutes or so, and then
get that pleasure pain balance
Right.
back to
So we were
normal
talking about proportion of risk.
Yeah, so let me bring up a specific example, and feel free to take this a different way if you'd like. But I recently had a friend who got pregnant, and somewhere along their pregnancy, they decided to do a gender reveal. And they didn't want to know until the party, and so they had a friend look at the results. And this is, and the friend looked at the results, and they saw, hey, there's this one number on here that's wrong. Everything else looks good except for this one number. And so that's how she found out that she had, I guess, some marker or something like that the baby might have Down syndrome. Which I think is a horrible way for them to find out. First of all, in my opinion, when that type of marker shows up, a doctor should call you and talk with you. And I would encourage anyone who has results to wait to interpret them with the doctor, because guess what you do if you don't have the doctor's results? You hop on Google, you start reading all the things, and you go all of the worst ways that you can. And this particular friend, they got these results on Friday night after 5 o'clock. And so they had the whole weekend to think about it. And 8:01 on Monday, they were calling right away to find out. And they found out at that point, there's a, whatever it was, 25% chance that they have Down syndrome. And then, as time went on, they did further tests to further refine that and get closer to that 100% confidence. But yeah, I guess, how do you deal with that? And what are your thoughts on how you handle when you get some news like that? Oh, you have 25% chance of some defect or some issue or cancer or whatever it may be. What does that mean?
No, that's such a great question, because this again goes back to like the logical part and the emotional part. So logically you'd go, okay, well, it's less likely that the bad thing's true than it is that the good thing's true. So should I feel happy about that? Like, should I be okay with that? Logically, and then like, again, logically, you can't do anything about it. You can't change those likelihoods. You have to just wait and see what the future holds, right? What is that truth? But emotionally, none of that fits. And this is what I was saying, like there's sort of these two halves to these statistics. One's like the actual facts, and then the other is emotionally how we how we deal with it and what are we going to do with that. And, you know, I don't think that our emotional response to risk is ever really proportional to the actual risk. We're
Yeah.
going to feel emotionally about that risk based on what we see in the news, what's happened in our history, what we're personally afraid of, the things that are most recent in our history, right? Like recency bias is something like things that you've heard about recently loom larger than things you haven't heard about recently. You know, if you have someone in your family with Down syndrome, you may be less concerned about it because you have experience with it. You know it. If you've never met somebody with Down syndrome, again, you hit the internet and then you're terrified. And so again, like the 25% has nothing to do with emotionally how you're going to feel about it. And I think giving ourselves some grace about those risks and those concerns, you know, and I do this too. I get very afraid for my husband, and it's like I repeat statistics to myself of like the likelihood that something bad's going to happen to him, and it doesn't make any difference, right?
Yeah, I
I
was
can
gonna
say
say, I
there's
don't know
like
if that makes you
one in
feel better.
10,000 chance that something bad's going to happen, and yet I'm still afraid. So that's what I'm saying. The emotional processing and the statistical processing are two different processes, and you just have to be aware of both of them. So like what I would say is allow yourself the grace to have that emotional reaction, but don't use just that emotional reaction in whatever decision you're going to make.
Yeah.
And certainly give yourself the time, right? You can't process statistics when you feel emotional. You have to kind of wait for that first wave to go by and then stop and think about it.
Well, I think you know, I'm very glad that so many times we've talked about how there's the emotional side and the logical side. And by the way, you know, people naturally, you're going to be tending more one side towards the other or the other. Me, I'm an extremely rational, logical person, and I actually had basically no displayed emotions for a while. It wasn't until the last few years where I started to explore that a lot more, to get more understanding about that emotional side, have more in touch with that side. And whereas in one of the ways I've done that a lot is through my wife Danielle, because she is all the way on the other side. And just like I went too far on the logical side many times, she goes too far on the emotional side many times. And I'm like, I'm just trying to ask you what you want for dinner. Why are you crying?
Yeah, well, and it's also funny too, because what's too far for you might not even be far enough for somebody else. There might be somebody else who thinks Danielle is emotionally repressed,
Right.
you know. So there's just these scales of variance in here, and it is very sort of tricky. It's one of the things too where I think that we're taught in school to sort of activate these logical circuits. At least that's what I would think school does. I don't know if it actually does, but I would think that would be the point of it, is to get us into system 2 thinking and really slow down, use some of these logic skills. But as well, it's an emotional training ground. And yet we don't do a lot of things like meditation or breathing exercises or teach people how to handle emotions within the classroom. I think that's apparently left for the home life or the family.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's something that I think about on occasion, is I wish we were as emotionally strong as we could be intellectually strong.
For sure. And that's, by the way, one of the points of the tagline for Helpful for Life is the best education you never got.
Yeah.
And so that is the point. We're supposed to be a supplemental education to what you do get through the education system. And so emotion and things like that is one of the things that we'd like to talk about. One other thing that I wanted to highlight real quick, Alexander, before we let you go, that I really like that you did was, at the end of the day, you have your statistic, you have whatever it is, and you let yourself have the time to process and understand your emotional, and that's okay. That makes complete sense. Don't try and do the logical thing while you're in that emotional state. Feel the feels, understand that for a bit, and then when you're in a different spot, try and process that logically and figure it out what one of the things is, or what you're going to do from there. And that's the next big part, is what are you going to do with that information? Because in the case of this one, when it came to a baby that has some sort of disorder, deformity, whatever term you want to use, sorry if I'm using the wrong terms there, at the end of the day, it comes down to, okay, are you going to have an abortion? Which, by the way, if you could be the most right-wing person, but when it comes to you and your body and your baby and that type of thing, your mind might jump there, even if that's not what you believe or think. And we're not going to dive down that rabbit hole today, because that's a whole topic in and of itself. But at the end of the day, it's like, okay, are you going to have the abortion, or are you going to have the pregnancy to term? Step number one. And then after that, it's, are you going to keep the baby, or are you going to put up for adoption or something? And other than that, what can you really do? Besides, one thing I do want to point out, in case there are people out there who have some kind of diagnosis and they're like, well, why would I want to know in the first place? Well, for certain things, now that it's 2021, if you know, okay, hey, there is this possible disorder, well, guess what? There are these complications that can come up because of that disorder. And so we, as the doctor's side, we take all these additional steps to give you that additional care to check for those additional things. So I believe with Down syndrome, there's additional chance for some problems with the heart. And so they do additional tests and things like that. So those are a couple of the highlights that I grabbed from what we were talking about. Do you have anything else that you'd like to add?
Yeah. I would add two things. The first is that there is value in what you feel emotionally. So it's when you sit with it and you're allowing it to process, it's not just giving it a place to be felt so it's not doesn't become repressed or doesn't linger, but it's also that emotion is telling you something about what you value, right? Whether you when you feel fear, that's telling you that something matters to you that you're worried about losing. And so take the time to find what is it that you are afraid of losing that's generating that fear, or anger, right? Anger is about a boundary being crossed. So your anger is trying to tell you, hey, a boundary got crossed and you don't feel safe about this, right? And so find that boundary, know what it is. So the emotion is giving you your value sense. And then you need to combine that value sense that comes from the emotion then with the logical statistics about the way forward based on achieving the value that the emotion told you. Right? So you need both of them. You can't make, and this is what we talked about, a flat decision-making landscape. You can't make a decision with just logic. And you'll probably make a misdirected decision with just emotion, right? Together is where you can have the best chance of getting the outcome that you want. And then second, the part where you were saying, why do you want to know? This is where I go back to what will the action be, right? Do you have an action or a choice? And if there are actions that you could take or that the action might depend on the answer to that question, then you want that information, right? So with Down syndrome, early intervention can help ameliorate some of the challenges that children with Down syndrome will face.
Which is a fancy way of saying it minimizes the risks and
exactly,
helps.
Right? You can make, they'll learn to speak sooner. They can learn to walk sooner if you can make sure that they're getting the right therapies to begin with. But I've had things with cholesterol. My doctor was arguing with me about measuring my cholesterol. And I said, okay, hang on. I eat really well. I'm in decent shape. I exercise. And I'm not going to take a statin. So if my cholesterol comes back and it's a little bit high, I'm not going to do any different action than if my cholesterol comes back and it's in the right range. So that's not a piece of information that I need. And that's personal to me, right? I'm not recommending other people do that. But for me, that's not a piece of information that I need because I know I'm not going to take an action differently based on the result that comes back, right? I remember getting in an argument with a doctor when I was really sick in college, probably picked up something when I was in Namibia or Botswana. And she's like, well, we could run all these viral tests to figure out what virus you have. And I said, will it change the treatment plan? And she kind of looked at me. She's like, well, no, they're all viruses. We can't really do anything about it. You just have to get better. And I was like, then what's the point of the test?
Yeah.
So I agree with you that having information, if it can inform an action, is really important. But if you already know what you're going to do and no amount of information is going to change that, or there's just nothing you can do with that piece of information, then you have a right to be like, nah, I don't need that piece of information. So I don't know if that helps at all or makes things harder.
I think that's great. And I think that's a good spot for us to put a bow on it. And thank you so much for coming on again, Alexandra. We're so glad to have you. And as a reminder, Alexandra's company is called Mirakinos. And so you can find it at what is your website? What's your website, Alexandra?
It's mirakinos.com.
And spell that one time for our audience.
So it's MERAKINOS.com.
Awesome. And if you're on YouTube, you can see her name and her company is on the screen right now. And there's also, for those of you who are kind of interested in this kind of thing, especially if you are in a nonprofit or a community type of business, and you think that you need to get a little bit more data to make some better decisions about what you are going to do with your company or your nonprofit. Where's the money going to come from? Where does it go? Where did it come by Cotton Eye Joe? I don't think that part is part of her branding, but go check out her podcast.
But we could do a jingle for you.
We could.
Please, I'd love it. I'd love it.
But please check out Alexandra's podcast. It's called Heart, Soul, and Data. And we'll put links for both of these things in the description. But you can find Heart, Soul, and Data on Apple Podcasts or wherever you find podcasts. And with that, you have a wonderful day, Alexandra.
Thanks so much for having me again.
All right, bye. Well, I'm just glad to know that when I'm thinking about what I'm going to do with the information, and I'm like, okay, what am I going to do with this Sex Panther statistics?
I know, right?
It's going to change. It's going to change.
Is it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. This
It's
time
totally
it'll
gonna
work.
change.
60% of the time it works every time.
Exactly. Yes. So we're going to take a quick 30-second, 1-minute intermission to change a couple things here on the set, and we will be right back with you.
Perfect timing.
Welcome back.
Welcome back to the show. I'm Reed Garcia.
I'm Danielle, cutting writer.
I'm Ope Danielle.
And I'm also from the Midwest, apparently, even though I'm not.
Ope.
I realized I do that whenever we were traveling in the RV, and I'm like, like all the time.
I do think it's funny how we have these little things that we like.
Yeah,
why
like,
does
yeah, no,
everybody-
yeah. Or,
Yeah,
yeah,
right,
no.
right.
Or, no, yeah. That's the name for the show.
So anyways, I'm Reed Garcia.
Ryder Richards.
And now we have on our couch the lovely,
Danielle Garcia.
who we have now revealed is my wife. 'Cause I don't
Shocker.
think we said that yesterday. But we gotta love that Danielle is now rocking not only blue hair, but blue eyeliner? Is that what that's called?
Well, it's eyeshadow. I just put it as bottom liner.
Look at you with your tricks and things.
Oh yeah, so tricky. It's not meant to be just the easiest form of the most impactful eye makeup possible. You know, like it's efficient. It's one thing to apply, and I get so many compliments. And I like it.
Yeah, and that's pretty awesome. So now we have a dog who is trying to play with us, so I'm going to kick him out
Okay.
real quick. But yeah, real quick, why don't you highlight these comments that we had recently, Danielle? So we had two from her. Here's the first one.
Yes. Okay. So whenever Alexandra was talking about, like our emotions are trying to tell us something. So here's what, like, fear means this. And then she was like, yeah, fear means that it's telling you that you care about something because you're afraid to lose it. Anger means a boundary was crossed. I'm like, oh my gosh, can you please do all of the emotions? Like, and what they're telling me and like the map to what that means?
So have you seen the emotion wheel? I
yes.
just found out about this in therapy, right? And because there's a lot of emotions too that are secondary emotions that we think are primary. We think if we're angry, then, this means like, I don't know, it's time to fight or something. And we get all geared up, or maybe it's flight, but whatever. But usually it's covering up some other emotion, some sort of insecurity or something else like that. But because the emotion is so overpowering, we never look beneath it.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Let's go ahead and swap these two so we pick up less. We're still working a little bit on our mic setup. I've now, sorry to completely derail the conversation, but I now have had ordered something from Amazon. They sent me the wrong thing. So I contacted support and said, hey, you sent me the wrong thing. Can you please make sure you don't send me the wrong thing again?
Were you angry about it?
No, I was very kind, but slightly frustrated because they did a similar thing a few months ago. And by the way, I ordered this now like 2 weeks ago. Well, they sent me the wrong thing again. And that thing is a stand so we can have a mic that connects. So now it's been 2 weeks, which is very frustrating. But anyways, speaking of frustration, I don't know if that's a first level or a second level emotion.
Oh, I don't. It's maybe if it hasn't gone all the way to anger, it's just
Yeah.
Like being frustrated. It's an emotion.
Yeah, that's like baseline what we're expected to be every day these days, right?
Yeah.
Slightly all day.
Yeah, so if there is a slight echo, please forgive us today. And if you need to blame somebody, blame Amazon. When in doubt. So let's highlight this second comment made by this lovely person named Danielle.
Yeah, the continuation of the trying to jot down her notes in the moment.
I just want to try and make the video here where it makes your
yeah.
face
Put it right.
exactly be on top of your face.
It's like trying out different hair colors.
Well, the real reason that we brought Danielle on today was because yesterday we had a lot of conversations about some spirituality things, and we talked about a pagan ceremony called Samhain, which is spelled Samhain. You know, if you read it like in plain English, it would be Samhain. But yeah, so we know that Ryder was busy resting away, but he caught a couple bits of it. So we wanted to see what his thoughts were. And then Danielle actually had a couple of interesting discoveries later on in the day where she's like, oh, I should mention those things. So that's why we brought her back on. So welcome to the couch.
Thanks.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So while I was sitting in the bubble bath, watching Helpful for Life, drinking champagne at 8 in the morning. Wait, no, that didn't happen. It sounds great now. I was super excited about doing that. Maybe tomorrow.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the things that when y'all were talking about things and you brought up Kundalini Yoga, because apparently the how do you say it,
Samhain.
Samhain. The Samhain, it seemed like it was incorporating several different practices, and that was kind of interesting because maybe 10 years ago I looked into Kundalini Yoga mostly because I was interested in the graphics of how Kundalini Yoga operates in your body through chakras. So I think their graphics are super amazing. And so that's why as an artist I got kind of interested in it. But it's a combination of I think 3 different kinds of yoga. So Kundalini Yoga within this event of several other kinds of spiritual events is like itself kind of an amalgamation of 3 different things. So that was sort of my first thought when I heard y'all talking yesterday. I was like, oh, hey, they're going to this, like, it's like a buffet of spirituality.
That's pretty cool. I like that. And yeah, one of the things we were talking about was how we are still learning about these things. And even though we've participated in a couple of things, been to a handful of Kundalini Yoga things, and Danielle's been doing tarot now for a little bit, we're still learning. And some of those things have to do with definitions. And also when it comes to tarot, at the end of the day, tarot is up to whatever interpretation you want to have. So why don't we start off with the tarot, because after the show, Danielle and I were, she was like, I'm not sure if I did that card exactly right. And so she looked up the definition and she was like, oh, that's even better than I actually thought it was. So do you have one in there that you wanted to pull out, or did you send me one?
Well, I sent you one.
All right. So
that was one that I
up.
looked up yesterday, so we should probably look at that one first. But first, I wanted to say, if you want to try Kundalini Yoga, they're doing it at the Groovy Coop today at 11.
Oh, okay,
So,
cool.
yeah, it's $10, and yeah.
Well, I hate it when my spirituality costs money. It's something that I try not to get involved together.
Well, it's like a workout class for your chakras.
There we go.
Yeah.
As long as it's physical fitness, I'm willing to pay for it. But you could just also go do some manual labor, which I've been doing lately. Build something for somebody. Dig a ditch. That's some good work.
Well, as you mentioned, there's other benefits to it as well, right?
Yeah,
But I would say that is something that I feel like a lot of people have a hang up on, right? It's like, oh, I don't want to spend money doing that thing. But the reality is that stuff is important, and more important than you know. And for you, as someone who's maybe been working on it for a while and you've been researching a lot on your own, you kind of know some of those things, right? But especially if you're brand new to the thing, then it's worth doing. And for me, one of the main reasons I do it is because you have the larger group and you have the set time and date to go do it. Which there's so much value to, because guess what? If, at least for me, and I'm pretty sure I can extrapolate this to the vast majority of people, if you don't have it scheduled at a time and day, you're less likely to do it.
Yeah, and I'm being a little bit flippant about the whole thing, but I honestly do think that spending money on things that can help you internally rather than just externally. We've talked about going to the dentist, right? People are willing to spend a lot of money doing cosmetic stuff, but doing some internal stuff is really worth the money too, and will stick with you every day as well. And it'll probably be much more long-term benefit than losing a few teeth.
Yeah. So Danielle is going to have a definition. We will share the link for this in the screen. Yet another thing that I'll complain about. I cannot connect my iPad to my computer because of some stupid dock issue. So we're still working on the tech in the background. But so why don't you remind us what the card was that, I wasn't going to say that you pulled, but as a reminder, it actually popped out. And so for those of you who are like, what the heck are they talking about? Yesterday on November 2nd, which was episode 26, Danielle did a reading for me, and which was also abstracted to all of you viewers. So if you haven't seen that yet, go check it out. But yeah, the card you pulled was what?
The High Priestess.
Which is the two
Oh,
of
Reed,
something.
I never knew.
Yes.
The High Priestess, man.
It is the second card, well, the third card, but Roman numeral 2, because it starts with 0, of the major arcana part of the deck, which talks about our soul's journey as the fool's journey through life. And so this description actually begins with talking about the magician, which is card 1. So the card that comes in between the Fool and the High Priestess.
And what's the website you're looking at?
This is biddytarot.com.
How do you spell that?
BIDDY tarot, TAROT.com.
And what's that site?
I think she was one of the very early tarot bloggers who started a blog in the tarot niche and has grown a following teaching other people how to read tarot for themselves. And basically, she encourages throwing away the book for a little while and just using your own intuition. So that's why I do like to, whenever I first pull a card, I just see what comes to my mind and then go back and, look at the traditional meaning later on.
Yeah, and as a reminder for those who aren't aware, tarot is a deck of cards, and much like a regular deck of playing cards, which has suits, spades, diamonds, and it also has numbers, So this is a deck of cards that has been interpreted for hundreds, if not thousands.
I think
of years?
hundreds.
Hundreds of years, and basically people have assigned meaning to these cards, and there's symbolism on each of these cards. But the cool thing is you can get all different types of tarot cards. So for example, Danielle has one that's themed as dogs. She also has one which she's brought on set here a couple times, which is the shiny gold inlaid type. And there's different art themes, which is one of the things that our writer got drawn to with tarot.
Oh yeah, that's just like with Kundalini Yoga. I love the graphics. I love the style of tarot cards. I love the personalization. It's the same thing with people that hand carve chess sets, right? I just find there's kind of a form or a formula there, and then you get to sort of enact your own kind of personality or unique vision upon them. And so it kind of gives you a framework in which to sort of expand and try something different. So I really like those. Yeah, it seems like a fun exercise. I would love to do it. Like if I was still teaching a class, it was a drawing class or a painting class, I wouldn't mind doing everyone make a couple of tarot cards
Yeah, it'd
or
be a
take
fun assignment.
one of the cups and just do the whole suite.
Yeah, so Danielle's reading from a site that lists out some of the interpretations, and this is one of the sites that she's really resonated with. So go ahead, read us the interpretation for the High Priestess card.
Okay. While the magician is the guardian of the conscious mind and the tangible world, the high priestess is the guardian of the subconscious mind and the teacher of sacred knowledge and hidden mysteries. Sitting at the threshold of the conscious and the subconscious mind, so that's what the two pillars represented, which
The two pillars had the letters B and J on them. One was
Yes.
black, one was white.
Yeah, and there's names for why they have those letters. But that's what they represent, the conscious and the subconscious mind. The high priestess has an innate ability to travel between these realms effortlessly. She teaches you that the world is not always as it seems, and more profound influences are often at play. She ushers you through the thin veil of awareness, and the thin veil is relevant because Samhain and Day of the Dead, Dia de los Muertos, it's the time when the veil is thinnest and we're believed to be visited by spirits. And this is a card that I have never really worked with that much before. Like, it's just never really come up in readings for me, and I've never pulled it as my daily card. So that was kind of cool. The veil is the thin veil of awareness, offering you a deep intuitive understanding and a heightened awareness of secret or hidden information.
Yeah, and just to clarify what this veil is that she's referencing is, some people believe that there's this physical world, right, where we are our meat tubes, meat sacks walking around and things like that. And then there's a spiritual world that's kind of a parallel thing going on at the same time. And there is some sort of boundary or veil between them. And so that's a very popular belief that around the time of Halloween, Samhain, there are other festivals that I'm not aware of, but around the time of October 31st, give or take a few days, the veil between the two worlds is very thin. And so that's one of the cool things that came up from this reading. Is like, oh, wow, what a good time for that to come up. So yeah, writer, I mean, do you have any thoughts on this?
Oh no, I find it all to be, it's a little outside of the realm of what I've been looking into lately. I remember sort of going through some comparative mythology whenever I was in graduate school and like looking into all sorts of different kinds of religions and ways that things could be sort of utilized or thought about. And so I'll sort of stumble across it on occasion. The idea that there is somehow an animating force or a spirit within us that when our body disappears, then that animating force somehow can retain some sort of, I don't know, autonomy, even in some sort of alternate state or alternate realm. It's very interesting to me because I it is still one of the magical things about humans is that we have consciousness. And so then what happens with that consciousness when we pass away? And I read something the other day, and this is a little bit of a tangent, but somebody was basically saying that there is this loop that dying and being born are essentially the same thing. Just because you're transferring consciousness into an alternate meat sack, so to speak, right? But that consciousness is based, and there's a whole theory based around whenever you wake up every morning, how do you know you're the same person? When you go into unconsciousness and then back into being awake again, then you retain becoming the individual you were previously. But a lot of that is based on memories. So what happens when you start removing the memories, but the consciousness remains? And so it's a kind of an interesting thought experiment to engage in, is what happens if you transferred consciousness into an alternate body? Because without the memories, it's just consciousness moving.
Yeah, and one of the things that I think we've kind of alluded to, if not talked about a few times, but in this day and age, in 2021, one of the very real things that we have to think about and discuss is, well, can you transfer that consciousness and or that memory to some sort of computer?
Yes, yeah.
And there's a really fascinating Black Mirror. Is that what it's called? Black Mirror?
On Netflix?
Yeah, on Netflix.
Yeah,
A really fascinating Black Mirror episode on this as well, which is like, hey, you know, it's that whole premise of the show is just they thought so long about if they could. They did not think about if they should.
Yes.
So yeah, that's a fascinating episode to watch.
Well, and there's a book that you should read called Every Day, I think, is the novel. And it's literally about a being who is just consciousness and wakes up every morning in a different body.
Oh, man. Okay.
It's very fascinating. And like, I mean, it might even be young adult. There's a romantic thread through it as well.
Ugh,
but just that, like, that concept,
Yeah.
I was fascinated by. And then they have, I think they wrote 2 other books as well. But.
Yeah, I mean, I like some of these ideas, and for me, that some of this comes into the I can't remember the guy's name right now, and it's kind of ticking me off. But he wrote this excellent thought experiment that was based around the idea of being beamed somewhere, as they would do on Star Trek, right, where they disintegrate you and then they reintegrate you again. And if they're doing that, then that's just matter or atoms being pulled apart and then put back together, yet you somehow still have the same memories and same consciousness. And the thought experiment he gave was that, what if every time you disintegrated, they were killing you and you were becoming reborn as alternate matter somewhere else? So the only thing that's the body dies, so you're repeatedly killing these people over and over again. It's just that because their consciousness transfers, we assume that it's the same individual, but it's actually a completely new individual every time. And this came up in a China Mieville. It's both Sam Harris had a podcast that talked about this on death, and then the other one was China Mieville's last book I read called Kraken. He starts referencing it, and if y'all haven't read any China Mieville, oh my God, this guy is something else. Y'all should totally check him out. Yeah, he is. One of the first books I read by him was Perdido Street Station, and it is just wild. It's wilder than anything else. So I would highly recommend it if you're looking for a crazy ride.
Yeah, I'll look it up.
Yeah, that's interesting. Thanks for sharing. So we not going to be the prettiest overlay possible, but I'm going to also pull up here an Instagram reel from the Samhain celebration, just to give a little bit of a taste of what that was like. We'll also put the link for this in the description so you guys can see on your own devices. But let's go ahead and push this here. All right, partially covers me up, but that's okay. And let me see sound. Hopefully the sound will come through too. Let's see. Yeah, so there's that was, and I don't think the sound actually came through for you viewers, so sorry about that, but make sure you click the link in the description, or you can go to Instagram, and you can look up this very specific Instagram. Why don't you tell us what this Instagram is, Danielle?
So it's Mystic Collective TX, and we are also getting a website that I'm setting up today. It'll be themysticcollective.com. And we're a group of 6 women around the downtown McKinney Square, and we're going to start setting up some more events for the community and just educating about our spiritual and psychic journeys on the blog. So,
yeah, and it was really cool because one of the people who came to this event, which was not a friend of a friend or anything like that, it was just someone who happened to find out about it, happened to come up to them later after the event and said, this was a really great event, and this is the first time I've been to one of these in over 10 years, and this type of thing would not exist in McKinney, Texas, 10 years ago. And so that's one of the really cool things to talk about a little bit about what Ryder and I spoke about on Monday, and also I think last Thursday or Friday, about what makes a city, what gives it its vibe. And one of the things I alluded to, I believe, at the end of Monday was, if the vibe isn't what you want, or if it's missing some aspect of what you want, because Ryder was talking about how Austin, and it's got a great music scene and a cool tech scene, but the art scene's kind of lacking. And so one of the things that I really like about what Danielle and her colleagues are doing is they want this to be in the world, and they're working on it, and they're creating it. And just by doing that, it will also attract some other people. And as it grows, it'll be really interesting to watch.
Yeah, I mean, I think I was immediately thinking of, there's some meditation centers around here as well, and there's some really great little things. What is it? The Herd
Museum,
and yeah, and sort of natural parks and things around here. That it's also sort of fascinating as a local how seldom we participate in all the local things that we can have access to. It's like we don't give ourselves permission to be a tourist unless we're on a vacation in a different state or country. And you can just be a local tourist.
I love doing that, just walking around the square and like, how did I never know this was here? Or
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, Danielle and I both grew up here, and the amount of things that we're still discovering and finding is amazing, because there's so much, and it changes every day basically, because there's so much development around here. And I know that's not the case necessarily for all of our listeners, but yeah, again, if there's something that you want to see in your community, something that you want to be a part of, then maybe you just need to be the first one to raise your hand and say, oh, I could do that, and let's start that.
And I'm immediately, what springs to mind for me is Roswell, New Mexico, where I grew up. They have this tremendous art scene out there because one guy who had some money from doing oil ended up developing a residency. And that residency has grown and got more support over time and is just phenomenal, and has led to so many great people being there and having this tiny town that has this terrific art scene. This also reminds me of places like Marfa, Texas, which are also, it's just an arts venue. This is out in the middle of nowhere, tiny town. I mean, we're talking maybe 1,000 people in this town. Maybe, I doubt it. And yet they have some of the best art for a certain type of art, right? That's Donald Judd and Dan Flavin and Chamberlain and people like that there. But one of the amazing things about it is you can do these kind of pilgrimages out to these towns, and it's because somebody made a choice. They staked a flag and said, this is it, and we're sticking here, and we're going to build something. And it happened.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, the last thing I want to end with here is the challenge for the day. And the challenge for today is for you guys to learn a little bit more about the Samhain celebration. And fortunately for you guys, whoops, that's the wrong button. Hey there, Ryder. Fortunately for you guys, the Mystic Collective has created a blog post just on this topic. And so I'm going to share that now in the chat so you guys have it, and we'll add it to the description later. And I don't know if there's some sort of, oh, that looks right. Right now, it's at the website, thegroovycoop.com/themysticcollective-blog. But what's the website you said it'll be at soon?
Just themysticcollective.com.
So themysticcollective.com is where it'll be hopefully later today. And today is November 3rd, 2021, for those of you who are listening in the future. But yeah, your challenge is to go learn a little bit more about this Samhain and maybe bring it up to somebody else and be like, hey, have you heard about this thing? And what do you think about this? And, do you think they're a bunch of crazies, a bunch of wackos?
Well, I was going to say, to hear you talking about, the veil being thin, yeah, and then there's just spirits, and yeah, the veil is thin. You're just saying things like it's fact. I was like, whoa.
Whoa. Well, sometimes the spirit takes control of you,
Yeah.
Well, yeah, any other last thoughts?
No, this has been fun.
Oh, awesome. Well, with that, everyone have a wonderful hump day, and you guys have a good rest of your week, and we'll see you right here tomorrow.